This video will be about joining text from multiple columns. So we have some text here, some first names, some last names, some titles, some middle names. That should be enough for us to work with. So let's see how we can join first and last names together. So there are a few ways to approach this in Google Sheets. So I'm going to start with the formula method and the AND operator. So I'm going to start with an equal sign, and I'm going to treat this as, let's take the first name plus the last name, right? So if I was doing math and I was trying to add two things, I would do the plus sign. But this is not going to work because we cannot add two pieces of text together. Now the sign for that plus for text is the and sign, or the ampersand. So that should give us those two pieces of text joined, so we can see how we have first and last name. Now the challenge we may have here is that we probably wanted a space between first and last name. So let's see how we can do that. So I'm going to go back, and currently I just take the first name, which is in our C2 cell, and then do the plus sign, which is our and sign, right? And then I want to add my own text to this. So because I want it to be text, it has to be in quotes. So I'm going to do quote, and then I'm going to type whatever text I want this to be. So I'm going to say my text here. So there it is. It's just text in quotes. So could have done more spaces, but I just did one just to illustrate it. Obviously, we can have spaces too. So if I hit enter, you'll see that what I have is the first name and then the text that I provided in quotes. Now, similar to a formula, if you're adding multiple numbers together, you can do this plus this plus this. And in this case, we're saying, let's take the C2, then this plus sign for text, which is our ampersand, plus our text. And then we can do another one of those signs, which is adding again. And then we can add something else, like this one. So now it should be the first name, whatever text I provide, and the last name. So if I hit enter, that's what I get. Now, finally, if I get back, now I'm going to replace this text that I have with a space that I want, which is going to be simply a space. So if I hit enter, that's our first and last names. And if I copy this down, that should be our first and last names. So that's a way to get our first and last names. Now, obviously, you could have done other things other than a space. If we wanted like a comma space, you would do comma space, copy it down, you have first and last names separated by a comma, right? So that's one way to do this, which is the and sign to join text together. Now, let's try to use a different method. I'm going to go back. Another way to do this is to use a function called join in Google Sheets. And the first thing is the delimiter. So delimiter is what it is that I want to use in the middle of different pieces of text that I combine. So if you remember, what I did was the space. Now what I'm going to do is that delimiter. So I'm going to do quote space quote because it's text, comma. And the next one is the values that I want to merge. So you have a couple of options here. You can either do this, comma, this. So I'm basically comma separating the first one and the second one I want to add. And if I hit enter, I'm going to get that. But I can also simply just provide a range, which is this. And I would get that result. First and last names. So that's our join formula, and obviously the same way you could have done a different separator and get a result like this. So that's first and last names combined. Now let's say not only we want to combine first and last names, we also want to possibly do the middle initial and maybe even the title. So we want the full name for everybody here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go and start by join. And what I want as a separator is my space. So what I want it to be the title and then the first name. I'm going to do comma on that range. And then I want the middle initial, comma here, and then last name. Close this out. And there it is. That's our separators. So that's pretty good, but if you pay attention right here, if we have missing middle initials, we're gonna get two spaces here, because basically we said that the separators we want is the space, right? And it's gonna put space between each one of these different cells that we have. Now, in this particular case, after Crystal, which is the first name, we then have a space, and then middle is usually nothing, but after that we still put a space, so we have two spaces. There are a couple of ways around this. So one way should be by using trim function. So I'm going to try this out. And there it is. That's our trim function, and trim removes unnecessary spaces, and now we're fine. That's one way to go around this. So that's trim. Now, another way to do this is by using another function that's called text join. And text join is similar to join, but it has an extra option. And that extra option is whether it should ignore empty cells in the range that you provide or not. So right now the first one is delimiter. So again, my delimiter is a space, comma. Then do you want to ignore empty cells or not? So what I'm going to say is true. I do want to ignore empty cells. So true for that. And the rest is kind of the same. So I'm going to do my title and first name, comma. Then I'll do my middle initial, comma, and then I'll do my last name. Close the parentheses, hit enter. There we have it. Roll. Push it down, and you can see how we have all these missing ones. We're basically just ignoring that extra space. So that's our text join function. So again, works similar to join. The only difference is you have this extra argument here that you can add as true or false. So that's our text join. Now, let's say what I want as a result is not what I have here. So let me just copy and paste values only here. What I want is this. So it's going to be the title, the first name, then I want this middle initial with a period after that, and then the last name. Let's try to do that. So I'm going to go here and start with my join function. What I said I wanted the title, then the first name, right? So separated by a space. So there it is. That's the title and the first name. And then after this, I want a space and middle initial, right? So I'm going to do this middle initial. So do this. Let's see what we get. So we got this. So let's see what we have. Now in this particular case, we have an extra space here. It's invisible, but it's after Crystal because of the same problem we have the join, right? That will treat those extras the way it treats them. Now, what we want after that is basically we want a period after each one of these initials. The problem with that period is that we only want that period when the middle initial exists, not when it doesn't exist. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to adjust this formula, and I'm just going to use join to simply just concatenate the title and the first name. So far, this is what I have. Now the next thing I want to do, I want to basically join this with a period after that when this exists, and otherwise just not use that period, right? So I'm going to leave this alone for a second. I'm going to go here. I'm going to start with my equal sign, and I'm going to start with a function called if. I have a video about if and ifs functions that covers a lot of details about this. But for right now, what I'm going to say is I'm going to check if this cell is blank, right? If there is anything in it. So there's a couple of ways to do that. So there's a function called isBlank that checks if a cell is blank and returns true or false. Or there's also a way that you can say if this is basically equal to nothing, and that means basically if it's empty, right? Then what do we want to do if it's empty? Basically, if that's empty, we don't want to do anything. We just want to leave it alone, right? That's what we want to do. Well, technically, we still want a space probably in there. So I'm still gonna do a space if the cell is empty. If the cell is not empty, however, I want a space, I want a period, then a space. Because I want a period after that middle initial. Or I just want the space. So if I just hit enter, so you'll see how we get a period, or we should get, well, we get a space here, and there is a period after that. So just to show you what happens here, if I just check the length of this, see it's the 2 characters because it's a period and a space, and this is a 1 character because it's just a space. So that's what our if function is doing. It's adding the period and the space after that. So I'll clean this out. So now what I'm going to do, I have this if function. I'm going to copy that without the equal sign, escape out of it, and go back here. And I'm going to use my and sign, which is the plus sign, right? And join that function right after that. So again, that and sign is like plus for text, right? So we're joining that to this. So one thing I forgot to do is the actual middle initial apparently. So I'm going to go back here. So what I want a space if middle initial doesn't exist, but when it does exist, I want it to be that middle initial followed by that period and a space, right? So the middle initial is going to be in the 2 cell, and then again we do the plus sign for text and we join this. So I'm going to hit enter. So copy this down, just to see what we get. So that should work. So copy this, hit escape, go back, and I'm going to replace this if function, which was almost right, but not completely right, over here. What I did a space, but it turns out I also needed another space before my initial. Right here we can already see the results. So I need the title, then the first name, then I need a space, then middle initial. So to add that space, I'm going to go, this is our middle initial, E2, and I'm going to do another space and another plus sign. That should join a space, then our middle initial, and then a period and a space if there is a middle initial. Otherwise, we could just add a space in there. So I'm going to hit enter, copy this down. Now I shouldn't need this, so I'm going to delete that. So that's so far the title and first name, middle initial with a period, or simply just a space if there isn't one. And then all I have to do in the end, I have to also join the last name. So I'll do another and sign, which is another plus, right? And I'll join the last name after that. I'm gonna hit enter, go here, move this down, and now we should have what we need. Now that's one method to do this. Now another way I could have achieved this is by doing something like this. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm simply going to use, again, my join function, and I'm going to add my delimiter, which is a space, and I'm going to add title and the first name. And after this, what we want is that middle initial. After that middle initial, I'm going to add a period and a space. After that again, I'm going to add the last name. So far that's what I'm doing. I'm just basically using join, and as one of the parameters in join, I'm just using my own text, right? I'm saying, let's do this, then do this, then do this period thingy we have, and then do this. Go ahead and hit enter. So that should give us this. Now you can see how I get this extra space between B and the period. The reason I get that because I included this as a separate argument here, right? So basically, and what it does, it basically takes each one of these pieces and it adds them together using this delimiter, which is a space. And that's why we should get actually that extra space. Now I should be able to just take this and just say, let's concatenate it to this E2 right away in here as a part of it. So instead of including it as another parameter to join, I'm saying let's combine these two together and use it as one argument in our join. So I'm going to hit enter. So that should give me that title, first initial, then our basically middle initial with a period, then a space, and then a last name, right? So that's what we have. I probably have two spaces there. I don't need this space, so I don't know why I did that, but we just need the period, and then the space is going to be created by this delimiter as another argument here. So that's perfect. So this works for this particular case. However, if I move this down, you'll see that in cases when middle initial doesn't exist, we get this period in the middle. So we have to handle that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this function called substitute. And I'm going to say, let's search for this text, which is going to be a space, period, space. So over here, there's no space, period, space. It's not going to find anything. But over here, we do have that. And I'm going to say, well, actually, the first argument here is text to search. So this is the text where we're searching, comma, and the second argument is what we're searching for, space, period, space. And then I want to replace that if I find it, which is replace with, so in this case, what do I need instead of this space, period, space? Well, I need just a space. So I'm going to replace it with just a space. So if I enter, well, it shouldn't do anything here because it's not going to find space, period, space. But when it does find it, in this case, it replaces that with just a single space. What I have to do, I just have to combine these two together. So right now I'm saying the F2. So what is the F2? F2 is all of these over here. So if I take this entire formula that I have, which is my join formula, I'm going to copy that, hit escape, go back here, and I'm going to replace my F2 with that complete formula, hit enter. I should get those results, but now I'm not connected to this. So I should be able to delete this column and still get my results. So that's another way, which might be a little more cleaner, I guess. But there you are. So we have our titles, first initial, middle name, last name. So that's a couple of ways you can use to join and do some string operations. So finally, the last function I want to mention is the function called concatenate. You may see people using that. So I'm going to use concatenate function. So the first thing is the title, comma. Then I want the space after the comma. So in this case, there's no delimiter, like we provide one delimiter for every piece of text we have. You actually have to provide which is the next piece of text you want to join. So I'm going to do this title, and then I'm going to do the space, and then I want the first name. After the first name, I want a space, so another comma. Then I want the middle initial, so comma again. And then after the middle initial, we want a period space, comma again. And then finally, we want the last name as the last piece. I'm going to close that right here. So there we have it. That should do this. And join them together. And again, I could fix this by using substitute function again to remove this space, period, space. But you already know how to do that. Hopefully that was helpful. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.